now the debate begins with the questions you submitted to the candidates that they have not seen. We're going to see if they can think on their feet. And this is the order that each question will be answered. Nancy, Mark, and then Kurt. All right? We'll start with number one. You each get 2 minutes to respond. So Nancy, first in line, here we go. Would you promote legislation to tax businesses that take jobs out of the country and provide incentives to those that create jobs at home? And how do you propose to fix the mess that NAFTA has created for American labor? And this question was submitted by David.
Well, I couldn't have written a better one myself. Thank you for that question, David. Years ago, I was a Republican. I was raised Republican, and I switched parties when we had a public policy on torture. But I call myself an Eisenhower Republican because when Eisenhower was in office, we had a 91% tax rate on the top earners in this country. Now, I'm not proposing a 91% tax rate, but the reason we did, because we were paying for the war. We weren't borrowing money from overseas, although we probably did for other things, but we paid our way in those days. And what has happened in this period of time is there have been no incentives for business to do anything other than what they're doing. And I'm talking about big businesses here. There is no incentive, as there should be. You get a tax break when you provide jobs in this country. You get a tax break if you invest in renewable energy. You get a tax break for the things that we need in this country. Right now, they're holding on to trillions of dollars, and they can do it because there's no real incentive for them to do anything else. They can invest that money with no risk, and we have to get back to giving tax breaks with a leash on them, saying those jobs stay in this country.
And Mark, now it's your turn.
Thank you. Nice question, David. You've touched on 3 or 4 areas. First and foremost, before you look to the NAFTA issue or the World Trade Organization, you have to take a look at what we're doing to our corporate residents here in the U.S. When you talk about one of the most confiscatory corporate tax rates now in the world, before you tune your eyes to what's going on elsewhere, you have to, I think, look at home first. If you want jobs in America, you need to make this a welcoming place for corporations to do business, to manufacture items, and to employ people. So first and foremost, you need to take a look at what we're doing to our folks here, and then level that playing field. Part of the reason that jobs are going overseas is because it is a more hospitable place for businesses to be. That needs to change, and that's something that this present administration has turned its back on. Second of all, when you talk about the World Trade Organization, the World Trade Organization is not enforcing the rules that were provided for in terms of world trade. So you've got to insist that they do that. Because right now, many of our competitors are breaking the rules, paying absolutely no attention, and the World Trade Organization is doing nothing about it. So when we talk about a global approach to the global economy and our competitiveness, first and foremost, make America stand on its own in terms of its corporate policies. Second, to the extent that you're going to be part of a World Trade Organization, insist that they treat everybody fairly, which they're not doing right now. Congress has a role in that, in its oversight capacity, to say if you're not going to do it, then we're pulling out. And we should if we can't get a level playing field for those folks. And then finally, the direct answer to the question is absolutely. If people have a choice of putting jobs overseas or here, I'm all in favor of rewarding those folks who create those jobs in America that pay a living wage for the communities those people work in.
Kurt, it's now your turn.
when you take a look at it, the United States used to be the leading nation for manufacturing in the world, and that has slowly disappeared over the last 20 years. There are a number of reasons that you can attribute to that, but it really comes down to the structure that we have laid, the onerous tax code, the corporate income tax that we have today. All those things were designed to where business was given other opportunities overseas. The playing field was not level. And it wasn't that they couldn't compete here. They could compete better by going overseas, making inexpensive goods, bringing them back here, and enticing us to buy them at cheaper than what they do here. I think every single one of us as Americans today would much rather have the products made here. We'd probably even be willing to pay a little bit more. And the reason why is because we know that when we buy things here that are made here, it is supporting our jobs, our neighbors, our communities, because not only are the manufacturing dollars stayed here, but also those tax dollars stay within our communities. The tax code needs to be reformed in order to allow us to reduce the number of deductions, exemptions that are made throughout it that will allow us to bring money into the government coffers and then lower the overall corporate tax rate. Because when you lower the overall corporate tax rate, that is what is going to bring businesses back here. When you start doing that, the playing field within the World Trade Organization and in trade pacts like the North American Free Trade Agreement are going to resolve themselves, because America is going to become competitive. We are going to become the nation again that is going to be leading the world, but it's creating those conditions where businesses come here to support America, and we support them by coming back here through tax reform, through buying their products, and allowing the jobs to stay here in the United States.
Question number 2, and Nancy, you're first to answer. What is your position on the Patriot Act as it currently stands? Are we safer with it in force or not? And should there be any provisions or changes to its present state? And that was submitted by Dr. Searles.
Well, I support the Constitution, of course, and I find that the Patriot Act to be unconstitutional. There's an invasion in our privacy. I don't know if you've seen recently where the FBI can now go into your garbage without any reason for suspecting you. It's a catastrophe. Our safety is going to depend on a lot of things, but not the Patriot Act. There are other things that we can do to assure information is gotten in a correct way. So I didn't support the Patriot Act when it passed. I don't support it now.
And Mark, now it's your turn.
Thank you. The answer to Dr. Searles, if I fall from view here, it's all part of the program, don't worry about that. The answer to Dr. Searles' question is I do not support it the way it presently exists. I think the Constitution takes precedence over what has been written in the Patriot Act. That doesn't mean that you can't have national security. I think it can coexist side by side with the constitutional protections that we all expect and enjoy in the Bill of Rights and elsewhere in the Constitution. If there are national security issues that require timeliness, short fuse for time to make decisions on warrants or access or phone taps or searching other areas, if there is a speedier process that needs to be entailed, which still involves the due process rights, probable cause, those sorts of things, then fine, let's create that. But it is a strong system that we have been working under that is not broke and doesn't need to be fixed in the name of the Patriot Act to basically cause us to have to check our constitutional rights at the door in the name of national security. So, what would you do if you had to make some changes? The changes would be this: if there are areas that are demonstrated where you need a more timely probable cause determination by those authorities, then fine. Set up those structures which allow you to get that in a more timely fashion. National security is phenomenally important, but not to extinguish constitutional rights.
And Kurt, it's now your turn.
The Patriot Act was the largest expansion and intrusion into our lives that the United States has ever experienced. It was done in reaction to the attacks on 9/11. The blunt reality is, I have sat back in the Pentagon and seen where portions of that act saved lives by allowing the walls between the intelligence services, both domestically and internationally, to come down, to allow an unprecedented degree of cooperation. There are a number of areas that the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the CIA, and other agencies now use in a cooperative effort to be able to thwart, deter, and defend us against terrorist attacks from around the world. That said, the Patriot Act itself must undergo a complete review. We cannot just look at it and say, well, let's take it page by page. We need to figure out in each one of those by line, show me. Tell me what that line was written in for, what is the metric where it can be demonstrated that it has made us more secure, tell us how it contributes to our national safety, give us proof where we can do that and follow it through, and if they cannot demonstrate it, then guess what? It gets eliminated and we get our constitutional rights back. The Constitution is the foundation upon which this country was founded, and it must be adhered to. It cannot be compromised or sacrificed for the sake of expediency or because we have a reaction to an immediate need. While it is important, the Patriot Act itself must be reviewed. They quickly pushed it through this last time. We watched it, and it was amazing to see how the Democrats went from opposing it to suddenly wanting to rush it through and get it done. We can no longer afford to do that, and we must go back, begin to review it, and gain our rights back as citizens, because not every provision is necessary today.
And back to Nancy. Do you believe we must make changes to the Social Security and Medicaid systems to keep them viable? If so, what do you envision to keep the system in place? This was submitted by Betty.
Thank you, Betty, if you're out there. The kind of things that are being talked about in terms of Medicare and Social Security, I think are an affront to the American way. I happen to be on Social Security. I happen to have Medicare along with TRICARE from I'm retired military. It's a wonderful system, and there are things that we can do to ensure its survival. And I think we can do that once we do some of these other things about the tax code we're talking about. But one thing, for example, with Social Security would be to raise the cap. I can tell you with Medicare, there's plenty we can do. My husband back there has an insulin pump. Costs $3,500 for this insulin pump. I have an old version of an iPhone that'll do 1,000 times more than this insulin pump, and it costs $50 today. I was in an accident not too long ago, right after I filed. I was in the emergency room for 4 hours. The bill was in excess of $34,000 for the 4 hours. There's a lot we can do with Medicare and Social Security, but to do away with something that makes America America, I think is a wrong direction to go.
And Mark, it's your turn.
Thanks, Karen. First of all, there's a phenomenal credibility gap on the issue. I think first and foremost, when you talk about both of these issues, you need to start by telling the truth. And the truth of the matter is this: if you continue to do nothing and you don't reform the system, then they're both going to crash. And I don't care whether you're on it, or you're not on it, or you're planning on being on it. If you don't maintain it, doing nothing right now and letting the system crash will serve nobody. So let's be honest first and foremost and say,